Hi, today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about genes. We're going to talk about the genetic code. We're going to talk about DNA and chromosomes. We'll define genotype and phenotype. And that's probably what we'll cover in this lecture. So, how much DNA do we share? How much DNA is conserved across species? Well, oddly enough, humans and banana trees share about 55% of the same DNA. Bacteria, we share about 40%. And as you go up the tree, as you get closer and closer to the human species, we share more and more of our genes. So, for instance, we share roughly 60% of our DNA with Drosophila, or the common fruit fly. 75% of our DNA is identical to reptiles. Most mammals, we share about 90% of our genes. And chimpanzees, we have 98% conservation of genes. So it's kind of amazing just how similar we are genetically to other organisms. Um, okay, if you want to read more, there's a link on the bottom that you can cut and paste so you can read more about it. What is DNA? So DNA is a string of bases. They're very special bases. It's actually a base group, a phosphate, and a sugar, okay? And there are four of them, A, T, C, and G. And it's kind of amazing when you think about it because everything that we are comes from four bases that make up our DNA, which is crazy. So if you cut open your cell, just one of your cells, and you took the DNA in the nucleus because it resides in the nucleus of every single cell in your body, the same DNA in every single cell. And if we took that DNA and we stretched it, it would be like the length of a room. It's a huge amount of material. But again, remember, it's only made up of four bases. A, T, G, and C. Just those four bases bind to one another, and that's it. That codes for everything that makes us us, from like our toenails to our brains that think about the most abstract stuff. It's pretty amazing. All right, so how do we get this really long strand of DNA to fit into a single cell of our bodies? Well, nature came up with a really good way of doing that. One of those ways is with a chromosome. So if you look on the bottom of this slide, there's that X. That's actually a picture of two homologous chromosomes. So what the DNA does, it sort of scrunches up, okay? It scrunches all together and winds itself all around so that it can get smaller and smaller and smaller. Similarly, your brain does the same thing, right? So if you laid your brain out flat, it would be huge, but we need it to fit in our heads. So nature scrunches up the brain with all those folds and spaces. Same thing with DNA. DNA gets scrunched up and folded up into these chromosomes. Now, genes are special sections of that DNA. So you've got the base pairs, the A, T, G, C, T, T, A, T, whatever, and it goes on and on. Well, a gene is a section of that DNA that is made up of those bases, okay? So you can have some genes that code for like a protein in your body, and that gene may have like 1,000 bases, so 1,000 of those ATGCs that are binding together. But there could be another gene in your body that codes for making a neurotransmitter. Well, that gene might be 10,000 base pairs long. And all those base pairs are scrunched up so that you have a chromosome. And on that chromosome are thousands of genes. Okay? The Human Genome Project, what they tried to do there, and actually they were successful, is they took every single chromosome in your body. You have 46 single chromosomes or 23 pairs of chromosomes. What you see on this screen on the lower left-hand side, that's a pair of chromosomes, one from your mom and one from your dad, and they're kind of sticking together, okay? They're homologous chromosomes. And In the human genome, what they did was they unraveled all the chromosomes in a cell, and then they sequenced the base pairs to try to understand what genes are there. Okay. And they did that for the entire, for every chromosome in a body. So basically, they mapped the all the genes from a human being by unraveling all those chromosomes. It's funny too. You notice on the bottom of the slide it says every person has a slightly different code. Sure, we're all really, really different. But the weird thing is that we share 99.5% of the same DNA, the same everything. Okay, the same genes, everything. There's just a very slight differentiation that makes me me and you, which is kind of wild if you think about it. So if you're really interested in learning about genetics, okay, this is a really wonderful site. It's at the University of Utah. It's you could probably just Google learn.genetics, Genetic Science Learning Center at the University of Utah, and you can click on all these different links and learn all this really interesting stuff. So how DNA, I don't know if you guys know this, but DNA codes for proteins. Okay, the central dogma of biology is DNA gets transcribed into messenger RNA, which then gets translated into proteins. And basically, everything that makes you you is a protein. Everything in your body is a protein. And it all comes from those base pairs that make up the DNA. Okay, it's really interesting stuff. There's also that nice section on stem cells. If you're not familiar with stem cells, it's very eye-opening. Okay, so a lot of people don't understand exactly what a stem cell is. So that's a really nice link. You might want to check it out. Okay, so like I said, chromosomes are the X that you see in this picture. And a gene is just a section of DNA that makes up that chromosome. Okay? All right. This is a picture of a human karyotype. Basically, what they did was they opened up like somebody's cell and they put some dye into one of those into the nucleus of that cell, and they were able to see a human karyotype. That is, they were able to see the chromosomes that belong to that individual. Okay, and that can be really important. But before I get there, so we have 46 chromosomes or 23 pairs. All right. We get 23 chromosomes from mom, that's in her egg, and we get 23 chromosomes from dad, that's in his sperm. And when those two come together, we get 23 pairs, okay? 44 of them, so 1 through 22, are called autosomes. Okay, so they're like coding for things that you can find those all over the body, and they code for things in the body, all right? But there's a special 23rd pair, and they're the sex chromosomes, okay? The karyotype that you see here is a male. Why? Because it has one X chromosome and one Y chromosome. And as you can tell, the Y chromosome is super small. And that's because there's actually not a lot of genetic information there. There's tons of genetic information on the X chromosome, but not so much on the Y. One of the most important things on the Y chromosome is the genes for testosterone. So there are genes for testosterone on the X chromosome too, because women do have a certain amount of testosterone. But there's a lot more on the Y chromosome. And what happens is like 6 weeks in to, so when you're first in the uterus and the zygote and embryo are still forming, everybody's a girl. So everybody starts out as a girl. And then all those embryos that have a Y chromosome, that testosterone gene gets expressed about 6 weeks in, and all of a sudden the organism gets flooded with testosterone that create the male sex organs, basically. Okay, so that's sort of how that works. So genes are located on the chromosomes. and determine the inherited characteristics that make us us. Okay? So genes hold the information to build and maintain an organism's cells and pass genetic traits to offspring. Those genes, here's a great picture. So you see this spiral. That's actually the structure of DNA. The bases bind to each other, and then the string of those bases twists up into a helix. Okay? It helps to scrunch things up a little bit. And a gene, like you see in this picture, is just a certain section of that DNA. Okay? And that DNA codes for proteins, which make up basically your entire body. Okay? And as you can see, it says chemicals organized into 4 pairs. A binds to T, T binds to A, C binds to G, and G binds to C. And that's it. That's what makes up all your DNA. Now, and the A is adenine and thymine and cytosine and guanine. Those are the names of the really funky bases. I'm not going to test you on the name of the bases. I just wanted you to have kind of a picture of what's going on. Okay, lastly, when we talk about somebody's genotype, we're talking about all the genetic material that they have, okay, their DNA. But when we talk about somebody's phenotype, we're talking about the expression or the behavioral outcome of that genotype. So phenotype can mean anything. It can be the color of your hair. It can be the way your fingers look. But it can also be like your personality, the type of behaviors, like if you're really neurotic or you're very, very mellow. That's all a phenotype of your genotype. So frequently in the book, they're going to talk about genotype. And when they're doing that, they're talking about the genes that the person has. When they talk about the phenotype, they're talking about how those genes are expressed. And like I said that they can be expressed in numerous ways. Okay. Okay, I'm not going to go into meiosis and mitosis. I think that's all that we're going to talk about for the moment. Okay.